The wind screamed across the endless white land of Varthion. A human named Elias walked slowly through the snow, his boots sinking deep with every step. The cold bit through his suit, and even his breath froze inside his helmet. He was alone, lost, and running out of time. His ship had crashed 2 nights ago during a magnetic storm. Now only smoke and twisted metal remained where his vessel once stood. The communication system was broken, his food almost gone, and his energy core was dying. The world around him was silent, except for the howling wind that never stopped. Elias checked his scanner again, hoping for a signal, but it blinked red. No life detected, it said, over and over. Still, he refused to give up. He was a human explorer, and giving up was not in his nature. He walked toward a mountain ridge, searching for shelter. The sky above was filled with ice clouds, glowing faintly blue. It looked beautiful but deadly. One mistake, and the cold would turn his body into a statue of frost. As he climbed the ridge, his vision blurred, his hands shook, and his knees felt weak. He whispered to himself, just a little further. But deep down, he knew his body was close to its limit. Then, through the roaring wind, he heard something, a sound that didn't belong to this dead world. It was soft, almost like a voice. At first, he thought it was just his mind playing tricks. But then it came again, faint and trembling. Please, help me. Elias froze. His heart began to pound. He looked around, scanning the snow-covered plain. "Who's there?" he shouted, but the wind swallowed his words. Still, he followed the sound, drawn by something he couldn't explain. After a few steps, he saw something half buried in the snow, a figure, small and fragile, lying motionless. He rushed forward and brushed away the ice. What he saw made his breath catch. It was not human. The creature's skin was pale blue, glowing faintly under the stormlight. Her hair shimmered like frozen glass, and her lips trembled as she struggled to breathe. Her eyes, half open, shone with silver light. The eyes of a Krelian. Elias stepped back in shock. The Kyralians were known as humanity's enemies. They were said to be cold-hearted beings who lived in the frozen parts of the galaxy. Yet now, one of them was lying before him, weak, helpless, and dying. She whispered again, her voice breaking. "Will you share your warmth with me, human?" Elias stood frozen, torn between fear and compassion. If he touched her, his people would call him a traitor, but if he walked away, she would die here, alone in the snow. His heart pounded as he looked at her shaking body. The wind screamed louder, and the sky flashed with lightning. He knew he had only minutes before the cold claimed them both. Slowly, Elias knelt beside her. He took off his emergency thermal blanket and wrapped it around her fragile body. Her skin felt cold as glass, but under his touch he felt a faint heartbeat. He held her close, pressing his suit's heat regulator to maximum. The warmth began to spread between them, and her breathing grew stronger. Her eyes flickered open, and she looked up at him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Human and alien, two beings who were never meant to meet, yet somehow connected by survival. "I'm Lyra," she whispered weakly, her breath fogging the air. Elias nodded, still unsure if this was a dream. He looked around and spotted an old structure nearby, the remains of an outpost. He lifted her carefully and started walking toward it. The snowstorm grew worse, but he kept moving. Each step felt heavier, but something inside him refused to stop. When they finally reached the outpost, Elias kicked the door open. Inside, the air was still and cold, but at least the wind couldn't reach them. He laid Lyra down near a rusted heater and used the last of his energy cell to power it up. Warm air filled the small room, and for the first time, Elias could breathe properly. Lyra's body stopped shaking, and a faint color returned to her face. She looked at him and whispered, "Humans were said to be cruel, but your warmth feels different." Elias didn't know what to say. He just sat beside her, staring into the weak glow of the heater. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside that broken outpost, two hearts began to beat in the same rhythm. The warmth they shared was more than just heat. It was the beginning of something that could change two worlds forever. The storm howled outside the ruined outpost, shaking the old walls like a living beast. Elias sat near the small heater, his body still trembling from the cold. Beside him, the alien girl, Lyra, lay wrapped in the thermal blanket, her eyes half open. Her breathing was slow, but she was alive, and that was something Elias hadn't believed possible a few hours ago. He looked at her pale blue skin, glowing faintly in the dim light. It reminded him of moonlight reflecting on frozen water. She looked fragile, almost breakable, yet there was a quiet strength in the way she kept breathing despite the pain. He wondered how long she had been out there, alone in that deadly cold. Lyra stirred, whispering softly, Why did you help me, human? Her voice was weak, but her eyes carried a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Elias sighed, rubbing his hands together for warmth. I don't know, he said quietly. Maybe because... You asked, Lyra blinked slowly, confused. My people said humans had no heart, only hunger for conquest. Elias gave a tired smile. Then maybe your people never met the right human. Outside, thunder rumbled across the ice plains. The walls groaned as if the world itself wanted to tear them apart. Elias checked his suit's monitor. His energy core was nearly empty. The heater would last only a few more hours. If he didn't find another power source, both of them would freeze by morning. He opened his survival kit and found a single backup energy cell. It wasn't much, but it could save one life, not two. He stared at it in silence, his breath heavy. Lyra watched him, her silver eyes dim but calm. That's your last one, she whispered. If you give it to me, you'll die. Elias didn't answer right away. He looked at her, then at the cell in his hand. His mind told him to keep it, but his heart said something else. He remembered her whisper in the snow. Will you share your warmth with me, human? Those words echoed inside him. Without thinking, he walked to her side and attached the energy cell to her damaged suit. It hummed softly, spreading warmth through her body. Her breathing steadied, and faint color returned to her cheeks. Elias felt his own suit warning him. Low power, flashing in red, but he didn't regret it, not even for a second. Lyra's hand trembled as she touched his arm. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe I don't need to. She looked at him for a long time, as if searching for truth in his face. Then she whispered, I was told humans could never feel the cold the way we do because their hearts burn too hot. He chuckled weakly. Maybe that's true. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the storm outside. Lyra began to talk again, her voice slow and soft. She told him that her people, the Kyralians, once lived on the surface of this world. They built great cities of crystal and light, powered by the warmth of the planet's core. But after the war with humans, they were forced to move underground. Only a few were left on the surface. Outcasts, forgotten. Lyra had tried to find survivors, but instead she found death in the cold. Elias listened, his heart heavy. He had always been told the Kyralians were dangerous, that they started the war. But now, hearing her words, he wasn't so sure. Maybe both sides had been lied to. Maybe warmth and cruelty existed in every race. The heater flickered, the power nearly gone. Elias stood and looked through a broken window. In the distance, he saw something faint, a flicker of light deep in the storm. It might have been a reflection from his ship's remains, or maybe something else. If he could reach it, maybe he could find more power, maybe a way to survive. He turned back to Lyra, who was barely awake. I'll be back soon, he said. Stay here, keep warm. Lyra's eyes opened slightly. Elias, if you go out there, the cold will kill you. He smiled faintly. Then I'll just have to move faster than the cold. Before she could speak again, he wrapped his scarf tighter and stepped outside. The wind hit him like knives, snow whipped across his visor, and the cold sank deep into his bones. But he kept walking, one step at a time, his heart burning with strange determination. Behind him, Lyra watched from the doorway, her fingers gripping the edge of the blanket. She whispered softly, her breath fogging the glass. Please come back, human. My warmth is not mine alone anymore. Elias disappeared into the storm, his figure fading into the white void. Above them, lightning flashed across the frozen sky, and somewhere in the distance, something stirred beneath the ice. Something ancient, waiting. The storm had brought them together, but the world of Varthian was not done testing them yet. The night on Varthian never truly ended. Even when the storm faded, the sky stayed dark, glowing faintly with frozen clouds that looked like silver smoke. Inside the ruined outpost, Lyra sat beside the dying heater, her hands trembling as she waited for Elias to return. Every passing minute felt like an hour, and every sound outside made her heart jump. When the door finally opened, the wind rushed in, and Elias stepped inside, covered in snow from head to toe. His face was pale, his lips blue, but his eyes burned. With stubborn fire, he dropped a small energy pack onto the floor and smiled weakly. Found this near the wreck, he said. Enough to keep us alive a little longer. Lyra rushed to help him, brushing frost off his shoulders. You shouldn't have gone alone, she whispered. The storm could have killed you. Elias smiled tiredly. You said I'd die anyway, remember? For a moment, they both laughed quietly, a rare sound in that frozen silence. After connecting the new power cell, the heater hummed back to life. Warm air filled the small room, and the walls glowed faintly with orange light. Elias leaned against the wall, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Lyra watched him, noticing the faint burn marks on his arm where the cold had bitten through his suit. She reached out gently, her hand glowing faintly blue. A soft energy spread from her palm, and the frostbite faded. Elias blinked in surprise. What did you just do? Lyra smiled faintly. We Chiralians carry warmth in our blood. It is how we survive the endless cold. They sat together for a while, silent, only the sound of the heater breaking the stillness. Elias pulled out a small metal chip he had found inside the wreck of his ship. It was blackened and cracked, but the markings were still clear. It carried the insignia of the human command fleet. Lyra's eyes narrowed as she saw it. That is not just a chip, she whispered. It's an order tag. Elias looked at her, confused. An order? Lyra nodded. Every mission chip holds secret instructions locked to the captain's DNA. Elias frowned. I'm not a captain, but maybe the system will still read me. He placed the chip into his damaged scanner, sparks flickering as the screen came alive. The message slowly appeared. Subject, Krillian contact experiment. Objective, observe biological reaction to human proximity under survival stress. Elias froze, his ear. At sinking, the rest of the message played in his commander's voice. Do not engage emotionally, Elias. Your mission is to confirm whether Krillian emotional structures mimic empathy or merely survival instinct. The words cut through him like ice. He stared at the message, unable to speak. Lyra's glowing eyes dimmed. So, they sent you to test me, she said quietly. Elias shook his head quickly. No, I didn't know. I swear. But the guilt in his voice was real. She turned away, her breath shaking. I trusted you, human. I thought your warmth was kindness, not science. Elias stood helpless, watching her walk toward the far wall, her shadow trembling under the flickering light. He wanted to explain, but words felt meaningless. Minutes passed before he finally said, I was never told the truth, Lyra. I just wanted to survive. Lyra looked back at him, her expression softening. Then maybe you are as trapped as I am, she whispered. She placed her hand over her chest where a faint blue light pulsed beneath her skin. Do you know what they took from us, Elias? Our warmth used to come from a living source, the heart of Varthian, deep beneath this ice. Elias listened, curious and silent. When humans came, they took its power for their machines and the world began to freeze, she continued. My people went underground to survive, but the warmth was never the same again. Elias stared at the heater's glow, realizing the energy cell he used came from that same stolen power. Every bit of warmth he had depended on the destruction of hers. The truth hit him hard. Maybe humanity had become too good at taking, too blind to care what it cost others. Before he could respond, a deep sound echoed through the floor. The walls trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. Lyra's head snapped up. Something's moving, she said. Elias grabbed his scanner. The signal showed a large shape approaching from below the ice. Then came another sound. A low, metallic roar, shaking the entire outpost. What is that? Elias whispered. Lyra's voice trembled. The old guardians. Machines built by my ancestors to protect the heart of Varthian. They must have awakened. Outside, the ice cracked like thunder, and the heater light flickered violently. Elias looked at Lyra, and she met his eyes. Fear and courage shining together. If they find us, they won't care who you are, she warned. To them, you are the enemy. Elias reached for his weapon. Then we better not let them find us. As the ground split open, the old machines rose from the frozen depths, glowing with ancient power. The past had finally found them, and it was no longer sleeping. The ground shook under Elias's feet. The air inside the old outpost filled with a deep humming sound that made the walls tremble like paper. Outside, through the cracked window, he saw the ice glowing from below, blue light spreading like veins through the frozen ground. Lyra stepped beside him, her silver eyes wide with fear. They've awakened, she whispered. The guardians of the heart. Elias gripped his blaster tightly, his breath fogging inside his helmet. What kind of guardians, he asked, but the answer came before she could speak. The ice outside burst open with a roar so loud it made the air shake. A massive creature, part metal and part living crystal, rose from the depths. Its body shimmered with frozen armor, and its glowing eyes burned with a cold, ancient light. Lyra stepped back, her voice trembling. It's a sentinel. My ancestors built them to protect our energy cores, but they were left alone for centuries, their minds twisted by time. Elias stared in awe and fear. The creature turned its head toward the outpost, its sensors locking onto the faint heat inside. Then it moved, crushing the ice beneath it as it crawled forward. Elias ran to the door and sealed eye. But the metal was old and weak. Each step the creature took made the ground crack deeper, shaking the entire shelter. "We have to move," Elias said, grabbing his pack. Lyra shook her head, her eyes glowing faintly. "It's too close. It can feel our warmth." The wall exploded as a massive claw smashed through the structure, sending shards of ice flying. Elias shielded Lyra and fired his blaster, the beam cutting through the air and striking the creature's head. The blast left a glowing scar, but the sentinel didn't stop. It turned its massive face toward him and released a burst of freezing mist that turned the floor to glass. Elias slipped, falling hard, the blaster skidding out of reach. Lyra ran to him, kneeling beside his frozen arm. "You can't fight it like that," she said. "Its body feeds on energy. The more you attack, the stronger it gets." The creature raised its claw again, ready to crush them. Lyra closed her eyes, whispering something in her native tongue. A soft blue light spread from her hands, wrapping around Elias like a shield. The claw came down, but the energy barrier held, cracking but not breaking. Elias felt warmth radiate from her, mixing with his own fear. When the light faded, he saw her collapse to her knees, exhausted. He pulled her up and shouted over the roaring wind, "We need to draw it away from the outpost, maybe toward the ridge." Lyra nodded weakly, her voice barely audible. "There's a tunnel system under the ice. If we reach it, we can lose it." They ran through the broken wall and into the storm. The sentinel roared behind them, its massive limbs tearing through the snow like thunder. Elias fired his blaster again, not to hurt it, but to distract it. The creature followed the flashes of light, smashing everything in its path. Each explosion lit the storm in brief flashes of blue and orange. Lyra stumbled, falling into the snow. Elias turned back immediately, pulling her to her feet. She tried to stand, but her strength was fading fast. He lifted her onto his back and kept running, his leg is burning from the cold. Behind them, the sentinel howled, a sound that felt more alive than any machine should be. Finally, they reached a crack in the ice that led down into darkness. Elias jumped without hesitation, sliding down the frozen tunnel with Lyra in his arms. The sentinel's claw reached after them but stopped. The hole was too narrow for its massive frame. Elias hit the ground hard, the fall knocking the breath out of him. Lyra lay beside him, weak but alive. They landed in an underground cavern filled with glowing crystals. The light reflected off the walls like stars trapped in ice. Elias looked around in awe. "What is this place?" Lyra smiled faintly. "This is where my people once lived, before the cold took everything." She reached out and touched one of the crystals, and it glowed brighter. "These crystals remember warmth," she whispered. "They store it, like hearts that never stopped beating." Elias placed his hand beside hers, and for a moment, the crystal pulsed brighter. It felt warm, alive, as if responding to both of them together. Lyra looked at him and smiled weakly. "You carry warmth too, human, not just in your body, but in your soul." Before Elias could reply, a rumble echoed through the cavern. Cracks spread across the walls. The sentinel was digging down. Elias gritted his teeth. "Then we find a way out before it gets here." Lyra's eyes glowed again, her hand touching the crystal once more. "There's a path," she said, "a tunnel leading to the old core chamber." Elias nodded and helped her stand. As they moved deeper into the glowing tunnels, the ground above them shook again. The beast in the ice was coming, but somewhere in that frozen darkness, a faint warmth began to grow, a heartbeat that refused to die. Deep beneath the frozen crust of Varthian, the tunnels stretched like veins of forgotten light. Elias and Lyra walked through them carefully, the glowing crystals lighting their path with soft blue fire. Each step echoed in the silence. Each breath fogged the air like ghost smoke. Above them, the faint roar of the sentinel still rumbled, hunting through the ice. Lyra leaned weakly against the tunnel wall, her energy fading after the fight. Elias adjusted his damaged helmet and handed her a water capsule from his pack. "Drink," he said softly. "You need your strength." She looked at him with tired eyes and took a small sip. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You risked your life for someone your people called an enemy." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time someone broke the rulebook." As they moved deeper, the tunnel widened into a vast underground chamber filled with ancient machines. Most were dead and covered in frost, but in the center stood a tall communication tower, cracked but still standing. Elias's heart jumped. "If I can repair that beacon, maybe I can contact the fleet." Lyra froze, fear flashing across her face. "The fleet? Your people?" Elias nodded. "If they know I'm alive, they'll send rescue." Lyra looked away, her voice trembling. "Or they'll send death." He hesitated, not understanding at first, But then he remembered the mission file, the secret order chip, the words from his commander. Observe the Krillian, confirm emotional mimicry. The truth burned in his mind, but he pushed it aside. They'll come for me, he said quietly. And maybe they'll take you too. Lyra shook her head. Humans don't rescue those they fear. Still, Elias started working, connecting wires and rerouting power from a nearby generator. Sparks flew, and the ancient system hummed to life. Lyra stood behind him, watching the faint red glow rise through the tower like blow. Odd, Elias, she said softly. If you send that signal, it won't save us. He didn't answer. He only whispered to himself, I just need to try. The beacon activated, sending a pulse through the air, a cry for help in the storm. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then the static-filled voice of command echoed through his communicator. Explorer Elias Carter, signal received, confirm status. Elias's chest tightened, hearing familiar human voices again. This is Elias, survivor of crash site Gamma 4, he said quickly, requesting immediate extraction. I'm not alone, I have a Krillian survivor with me. He didn't finish the sentence, the voice on the other end cut in sharply. Repeat last transmission. Did you say Krillian? Elias hesitated. Yes, she's with me. She saved my life. A long silence followed, broken only by the hum of the tower. Then the final words came, cold and merciless. Acknowledged, Elias Carter, extraction in progress. Eliminate the alien before pickup. Elias froze, his heart sinking. He turned to Lyra, who had already understood from his face. They gave you your real order, she whispered, her voice cracking. He dropped the communicator, his hands shaking. No, I won't, he said. They're wrong. Lyra stepped back, tears glimmering in her silver eyes. Now you see what betrayal feels like. The beacon's red light began to flash rapidly, a signal that the human drones were already descending. Elias ran to the control panel, smashing it with his blaster. Sparks exploded as the beacon went dark, but the signal had already gone out. They're coming, Lyra said softly, and they will not stop. Elias turned toward her, determination burning in his eyes. Then we make them stop, he said, together. They grabbed what little gear they had and began to run through the tunnels. Above, the distant sound of engines echoed through the ice. Hundreds of drones were cutting through the storm, scanning for heat signatures. Elias and Lyra reached a narrow passage that led deeper underground. She looked back and saw the faint red lights glowing behind them, hunters closing in. As they ran, Elias's communicator buzzed again. The same cold voice came through. Elias, this is your last warning. Failure to comply will result in termination. He ripped the device from his wrist and threw it into the darkness. I already made my choice, he said, breathing hard. They reached another chamber, a wide cavern with a frozen river running through it. Lyra stopped suddenly, holding his arm. This place, it leads to the heart of Varthion. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the soft blue light rising from below the ice. If we reach it, we can awaken the planet again. Elias nodded, his pulse racing. Then that's where we go. Above them, a crack tore through the ceiling as the first drones arrived. Red beams sliced through the air, melting the ice and shaking the cavern walls. Elias grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her forward. Behind them, explosions echoed, lighting the tunnel with flashes of fire and frost as they disappeared into the depths. The drones scanned the ruins they left behind. Their cold mechanical voices whispered, "Target not found. Continue search." Far below, in the endless dark, Elias and Lyra kept moving. He looked at her and said quietly, I sent the signal to call for help. She smiled faintly, and now it called for war. The human fleet was on its way, but this time, Elias knew exactly which side of the fight he was on. The tunnels grew hotter the deeper they went. Elias could feel the frost melting from the walls as faint streams of water trickled down. The air shimmered with strange blue light, and the hum beneath the ground grew louder with every step. Lyra walked beside him, her glowing eyes reflecting the pulse of the world around them. We're close, she whispered. The heart of Varthion is not far now. Elias nodded, his breath heavy. He could feel something alive in the air, as if the planet itself was breathing. It wasn't just a machine buried beneath ice. It was something ancient, powerful, and aware. They entered a vast chamber that seemed to stretch forever. In the center stood a massive crystalline core, glowing with deep red and blue light. Streams of energy ran through the ice like veins, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. Elias stared in awe, his voice soft. It's beautiful. Lyra smiled faintly, her expression filled with sadness. It once warmed our world, before your people took its power. Elias stepped closer, feeling the heat radiate through his gloves. He could see movement within the crystal. like liquid fire swirling beneath the surface. "Can we restart it?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, but it demands balance." Her hand hovered above the core, the glow of her palm matching its rhythm. "It needs both kinds of energy, fire and frost, warmth and silence, human and Krelian." Elias frowned. "Meaning, it needs both of us." Lyra nodded again, her voice trembling. "If I connect to it, I can give it life again, but my body may not survive the transfer." Elias grabbed her wrist gently, shaking his head. "No, there must be another way." She smiled sadly. "Sometimes, the only way to give warmth is to let it burn through you." He stepped back, torn between fear and determination. The distant sound of drones echoed through the tunnels. Drawing closer, they had minutes, maybe less. Elias looked at the crystal, then at her. "I won't let you do this alone," he said firmly. Lyra blinked, confused. "What are you doing?" Elias opened his suit's chest plate, revealing the flickering energy cell inside. "If this core needs both human fire and Krelian light, then it gets both." Before she could stop him, he linked his suit's cable to the energy conduit. Sparks flew as power urged through his body, making him gasp. Lyra shouted his name and reached out, her hands glowing bright blue. She touched the crystal too, completing the connection. Instantly, a beam of light shot upward, piercing the ice ceiling above them. The chamber exploded with color, red and blue energy dancing together. Elias screamed as the current rushed through him. It felt like fire and ice mixed inside his veins, burning and freezing at once. Lyra cried out too, her body glowing brighter until her outline began to blur. Through the pain, Elias saw her face, calm, almost peaceful. "This is what warmth means," she whispered. "It's not just heat, it's sacrifice." He wanted to reply, but his voice was lost in the roar of the awakening core. Above them, the drones reached the surface entrance. They detected a massive power spike, their red eyes scanning for the source. Then, one by one, their systems began to fail. The ground cracked and molten light burst from below. The heart of Varthion had awoken, and the planet was fighting back. In the chamber, Elias fell to his knees, his suit overloaded. He could barely breathe. His vision filled with white light. Lyra stood in front of him, her form flickering like mist. Her voice was soft, fading with every word. "You gave me warmth. Now I give you life." She pressed her hand to his chest, and her glow flowed into him. The burning pain faded, replaced by a deep warmth spreading through his body. Her figure slowly dissolved into the air, merging with the energy of the heart. Elias screamed her name, reaching out, but only light remained. The crystal pulsed once more, stronger than ever, and the heat filled the entire cavern. He fell forward, his eyes filled with tears that turned to steam on his cheeks. The hum of the heart grew steady, powerful, alive. The ice above began to melt, rivers forming and running through the tunnels. Elias crawled toward the glowing core, whispering her name again. "Lyra, please, come back." But only the soft rhythm of the planet answered him, a single spa. A arc of blue light drifted from the crystal and landed on his glove. It pulsed once like a heartbeat before fading into his skin. He felt her warmth there, faint but real. He looked up at the ceiling where the light shot into the sky. The ice was breaking apart. The world was changing. Elias stood weakly, staring at the living glow around him. "Your warmth saved us both," he whispered, his voice trembling. And as he walked out of the chamber, the sound of the planet's heart followed him. A heartbeat that now carried both fire and ice. The storm above Varthion had finally gone silent. The endless blizzards that once ruled the planet had stopped as if the world itself was holding its breath. Through the cracks in the ice, golden light began to rise, warm, gentle, and alive. It was the first sunrise Varthion had seen in 1,000 years. Elias stood on the edge of a glowing valley, his body weak but still standing. His suit was damaged, his visor cracked, but his heart still beat with a strength he had never felt before. The warmth from the core flowed through the ground beneath him, melting the frozen plains into rivers of shining water. All around, the land was waking up, the color returning to a world that had forgotten what life felt like. He looked down at his hands and saw the faint blue light still glowing under his skin, Lyra's warmth, her gift, her heartbeat. It lived inside him now. Every time he breathed, he could almost hear her voice. "You carry the warmth now, human. Keep it alive." The memory of her words filled his chest with both pain and peace. Above him, the human drones circled the sky. They had come to destroy, but now they floated aimlessly, their systems confused by the reborn energy. One by one they began to fall, their circuits freezing as the planet's power overwhelmed them. Elias watched as the sky cleared, the last of the machines, rashing into the snow with dull thuds. For the first time there was no war sound, no engines, only the quiet hum of life returning. He walked slowly toward the horizon, his boots sinking into soft melting snow. Every step felt heavier, yet every breath lighter. In the distance, he could see the ruins of a Krillian city glowing faintly beneath the thawing ice. Crystal towers shimmered as sunlight touched them, reflecting colors that painted the sky. It was like the planet itself was remembering beauty. Elias reached the edge of the ruins and fell to his knees. The exhaustion hit him all at once, but he smiled through the pain. He placed his gloved hand on the warm ground, whispering softly, "This world lives again, because of you." The ground pulsed faintly beneath his palm as if answering him. A soft blue spark drifted up from the soil, floating gently before his eyes. He reached out and for a second it took the shape of a hand, Lyra's hand, before fading into light again. He closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. The warmth inside his chest spread wider, and he realized that she was not gone. She was part of the planet now, part of every breath of wind, every drop of thawing water, and she had left her heart beating inside his. Suddenly, his communicator crackled to life. A voice from the fleet came through, sharp, mechanical, and cold. "Elias Carter, do you read? We've detected abnormal energy signatures from your location." Elias took a deep breath before answering. "This is Elias. The energy isn't abnormal," he said slowly. "It's life." The voice paused, then replied, "You are ordered to secure samples and await retrieval." Elias looked around at the glowing world, the rivers of light, the rising warmth. He shook his head and turned off the communicator. "No," he whispered, "this world doesn't belong to you anymore." He looked toward the crystal towers again and began walking. The air was no longer freezing. It was gentle, even soft. Snowflakes melted as they touched his bow. Remember, the light from the sky reflected off his helmet, making him look like a small star walking through a sea of gold. As he moved deeper into the city, he saw something strange. Small shapes moving behind the light, figures emerging from the ruins. Krillian survivors, their bodies glowing faintly blue. They had awakened from centuries of hibernation, drawn by the planet's reborn energy. When they saw him, they stopped, their eyes wide, unsure if he was friend or foe. Elias raised his hand slowly. No weapon, no threat, only warmth. "I'm not here to fight," he said gently. "I came to finish what she started." A tall Krillian stepped forward, studying him carefully. "You carry her light," the being said softly. "We can feel it." Elias nodded, his voice breaking. "She gave it to me. Her name was Lyra." The Krillian bowed their head, a faint smile touching their lips. "Then her warmth lives on." The crowd gathered closer, and for the first time, a human and Krillian stood side by side without fear. Above them, the sky shimmered with colors never seen before. Blue, gold, silver, and violet blending like living fire. It was the light of rebirth, the union of two hearts that refused to surrender to the cold. Elias stood there, surrounded by life and light. He looked up at the sky and whispered softly, "We shared warmth once, Lyra, and now the whole world feels it." A soft wind brushed his cheek, warm and gentle like a hand's touch. He smiled through tears. The cold world of Varthian was no longer dead. It was alive, awake, and free. And as Elias walked among the shining towers, with the heartbeat of the planet echoing under his feet, he knew that one act of compassion, one choice made in the snow, had changed the destiny of two worlds forever. The warmth of a human heart had melted the ice of an entire planet, and in that endless glow, Lyra's voice whispered through, "Geesh the wind once more. You shared your warmth, Elias, and now the universe will remember it."